Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. It had been 5 years since I last stepped foot in my father's house. I told myself it was for good reason, that I had outgrown the toxic man he was after my mom died. The truth was harder to admit, it still hurt. The house itself was a reminder of a past that could never be reclaimed. But something had pulled me back, a nagging sense of unfinished business. I parked a few streets away, not wanting to draw attention. The evening sky was darkening, the cold air biting at my skin as I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the familiar windows. The old house loomed before me, almost taunting. Nothing about it had changed. The hedges were neatly trimmed, the white paint on the porch was still immaculate, and the lights inside glowed softly. I clutched the brass key in my pocket, the one I had never gotten rid of. I wasn't sure why I had kept it all these years. Maybe because it felt like a link to my mother, a piece of the past I hadn't been able to let go. Now, it was more of a weapon than a relic, and I planned to use it. The key slid into the lock easily, the soft click echoing through the hallway as the door creaked open. I hesitated, my pulse quickening. What was I doing here? I had no business being in this house, but something in me demanded to see for myself what my father's life had become. Had he changed at all, or was he still the self-serving man I'd always known? Inside, the house smelled faintly of leather and wood polish, just like it had when I was a kid. Everything was in its place, every piece of furniture perfectly arranged. It was too neat, too perfect. It made my skin crawl. I walked quietly down the hall, past the framed family photos I couldn't bring myself to look at. As I reached the stairs, I froze. Voices. Laughter. My breath caught in my throat, the sound unfamiliar and out of place in this house. I crept up the stairs, each step deliberate, careful not to make a sound. The voices were coming from the master bedroom, my father's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I inched closer, peering through the gap. And there they were. My father and Lisa. In his bed. I blinked, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. They were lying together, their bodies tangled beneath the sheets, her laughter filling the room like an echo from a nightmare. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I pushed the door open a little wider, my chest tightening. The sound must have caught Lisa's attention, because she glanced over her shoulder, and saw me. "Jake," she gasped, her face draining of color. She jerked back, scrambling to cover herself with the blanket. My father sat up in bed, blinking in confusion, then realization dawned on him. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The air was thick with shock, the weight of the betrayal settling between us like a heavy fog. I swallowed, the words I wanted to say lodging in my throat like glass. I couldn't even find anger at first, just cold, hollow disbelief. "Jake," Lisa began, her voice small, trembling. "It's not what you think, really," I said, my voice hard and sharp. "Because it looks exactly like what I think." My father shifted uncomfortably, his eyes narrowing as if he was trying to figure out how to explain this away. "Son, you need to calm down. We can talk about this, talk." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You think I want to talk? After this?" I gestured toward the bed, my hands trembling with the effort of keeping my rage in check. Lisa sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. "Jake, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped. "You're sleeping with my father, Lisa. How's that for complicated?" I stared at them, the anger finally breaking through the numbness, pulsing through my veins like fire. I had never felt such a profound sense of betrayal. The two people I should have been able to trust more than anyone in the world had torn my life apart in a single moment. Lisa sobbed, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never wanted to hurt you, hurt me." I stepped into the room, the walls closing in around me. "You didn't just hurt me, Lisa. You destroyed everything. My father, still sitting in stunned silence, finally spoke. Jake, I know this looks bad. But you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything, I spat. You're my father. And you're supposed to be my wife. I could see him struggling to find the right words, but there were no words that could fix this. I had thought my father was a cold, calculating man, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. And Lisa, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, she had shattered my heart in a way I didn't think was possible. I don't want your excuses, I said quietly, my voice shaking. You can both rot in hell for all I care. I turned on my heel, ignoring the sound of Lisa's sobs, ignoring the stunned silence from my father. As I descended the stairs, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, but one was clearer than the rest: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They thought they could betray me and get away with it. They were wrong. As I stepped out into the cold night, the door slamming behind me, I made a vow. I would ruin them both. Piece by piece, I would make them pay for what they had done. And when I was done, they would wish they had never crossed me. This was just the beginning. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, burning determination. I was sitting in my small, cluttered apartment, staring at the files spread out before me. The evidence I had collected over the years was now my arsenal, and it was time to put it to use. I had a mission: dismantle Lisa and my father's lives. I would make them regret ever crossing me. I started with Lisa. Her career was her pride and joy, and I knew it was the perfect place to hit her where it hurt. I'd spent years working in corporate environments, understanding the power of rumors and whispers. Lisa's firm was known for its cutthroat nature, and I knew exactly how to exploit it. I picked up my phone and dialed Nick, my old friend from my days as a private investigator. He had always been good at digging up dirt and making things disappear. If anyone could help me with this plan, it was him. Nick, I said when he answered, my voice steady. I need your help, Jake. Nick's voice was a mix of surprise and concern. What's going on? I'm in a bit of a situation, I began, trying to keep my tone as calm as possible. I need you to dig up some dirt on Lisa's law firm. I want to know everything, personal, professional. And I need it fast. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You sure you want to do this? I know things have been rough, but, I'm sure, I interrupted. I need her career in tatters. Can you do it or not? All right, Nick said with a sigh. I'll get started. Just remember, this isn't going to be clean. Nothing ever is, I replied, hanging up. Next, I focused on my father. His business dealings were always shady, and I had kept tabs on his operations through various sources. I started compiling evidence: bribes, money laundering, and illegal deals. I had spent years gathering these scraps of information, knowing they would come in handy one day. That day had arrived. I made a visit to an old contact, Sarah, who worked in financial forensics. She was meticulous and sharp, the kind of person who could turn a pile of documents into a solid case. I needed her expertise to ensure the evidence I had was bulletproof. Sarah, it's Jake, I said as she answered her phone. I need your help with something important. Jake, it's been a while, she said warmly. What's going on? I'm looking to bring down someone who deserves it, I said, cutting to the chase. I have a bunch of financial documents, my father's, actually. I need you to help me sift through them and find anything that can be used against him. Sarah's tone grew serious. You sure this is what you want to do? I know you're angry, but this is bigger than anger, I snapped. I need this done. I'm counting on you. All right, Sarah said with a resigned sigh. Send me the documents. I'll take a look. As I worked with Nick and Sarah, the plan began to take shape. I knew that Lisa's fall from grace would be swift with the right push, and exposing my father's illegal activities would ensure his public disgrace. The combination of these actions would make sure they both felt the full weight of their betrayal. Days later, I sat in my apartment, staring at a freshly prepared dossier on Lisa. The file was filled with fabricated rumors and false accusations, ready to be leaked anonymously to her colleagues and clients. My hand shook slightly as I prepared to send out the first wave of emails. "Jake," a voice called out from behind me. It was Sarah, coming through the door with a stack of documents. "I've gone through your father's records. There's enough here to make sure he's out of business permanently." I looked up, a grim satisfaction settling over me. "Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. I knew I could count on you." Sarah gave me a hesitant smile. "Just remember, Jake, there are always consequences to these actions. Be prepared for what comes next." I said, though I wasn't entirely sure of the truth of my own words. "This is the only way." With everything in place, I watched from the sidelines as Lisa's career began to crumble. The rumors I had planted spread like wildfire, causing her clients to withdraw and her colleagues to turn against her. It wasn't long before her firm started questioning her integrity, and her once stellar reputation was in shambles. Meanwhile, my father's business was unraveling. The evidence I had leaked to the press and authorities led to a full-blown investigation. His name was dragged through the mud, and the company he had built was on the brink of collapse. As I watched their lives disintegrate from a distance, a part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. They were suffering, just as I had suffered. But deep down, there was a gnawing sense of emptiness. The vengeance I had sought was being realized, but it didn't fill the void left by their betrayal. I knew this was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, and I would see it through to the end. Whatever it took, I would make sure Lisa and my father understood the full extent of their mistake. And if there was a larger player behind it all, I would find him, too. The game was just getting started. The weeks following the sabotage were a whirlwind of media scandals and personal crises for both Lisa and my father. Watching their public unraveling was a bitter pleasure, but a nagging sense of dissatisfaction lingered. My anger had pushed me to take drastic actions, but something felt incomplete. The pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit, and I needed answers. Nick and Sarah had been invaluable in helping me with my plans, and I knew I had to talk to them about the next steps. I arranged to meet them at a secluded cafe, a quiet place where we could discuss matters without interruptions. As I walked in, I saw them already seated at a corner table, their expressions serious. "Jake," Nick greeted me with a nod. "We've been meaning to talk to you. Things are getting out of hand." I sat down, my face drawn and tired. "What do you mean?" "I've done what I set out to do. Lisa and my father are paying for their betrayal." Sarah leaned forward, her face troubled. "It's not just about them. We've uncovered something more disturbing. You're not going to like it." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my impatience barely contained. Nick pulled out a file and slid it across the table. "We dug deeper into the background of your father and Lisa's situations. Turns out, they were manipulated by someone much more dangerous than we initially thought." I opened the file and scanned the contents. There were documents and photographs linking my father and Lisa to a man named Victor Grayson, a notorious crime lord whose name I'd heard in whispers but never paid much attention to. "This Grayson guy," I said, "what's his connection to all this?" Sarah spoke up, her voice tense. "Grayson has been known for his manipulative tactics. He's got a way of pulling strings from behind the scenes. It looks like he orchestrated the whole affair between Lisa and your father, using them to get to you." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "You're telling me they were just pawns in this game?" "Exactly," Nick confirmed. "Grayson used them to destabilize you and keep you off balance. It wasn't just about hurting you, it was about control." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The anger I had felt seemed small and insignificant now compared to the manipulation I was discovering. Lisa and my father had been as much victims as I had been, caught in a web spun by someone far more dangerous. "So what do we do now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "We need to go after Grayson," Sarah said decisively. "He's the real threat. If we expose him, it might be possible to clear your father and Lisa's names. But we need to be careful. Grayson doesn't play by the rules. Nick nodded in agreement. We'll need evidence, and we'll have to be smart about how we gather it. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to end this. I looked down at the file, the weight of the new knowledge settling heavily on my shoulders. The sense of vengeance I'd been driving towards had just shifted. It wasn't just about getting back at Lisa and my father anymore. It was about confronting the real enemy and taking him down. I want to be part of this, I said firmly. If Grayson's behind all this, then he's the one who needs to pay. I won't rest until I've seen him brought to justice. All right, Nick said, his tone resolute. We'll need to gather as much information as possible. We can't afford any mistakes. Sarah looked at me with a mix of sympathy and resolve. This won't be easy, Jake. But we're in this together. As we left the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The anger I had felt before was now directed at a single target. Victor Grayson. He was the mastermind behind the chaos in my life, and it was time to bring him down. The next steps would be dangerous and complicated, but I was ready. The game had changed, and I was prepared to see it through to the end. With Nick and Sarah by my side, I knew we had a fighting chance. And so, the real fight began. The final showdown was looming, and the stakes had never been higher. My new focus was Victor Grayson, the puppet master behind the chaos in my life. With Nick and Sarah's help, I had gathered substantial evidence of his criminal activities, drug trafficking, money laundering, and even connections to organized crime. It was time to put everything into motion. Our plan was risky but straightforward: set up a sting operation that would catch Grayson in the act, making sure the authorities had enough evidence to put him away for good. We coordinated with a trusted contact in law enforcement, Detective Harris, who had agreed to help us take down Grayson. The operation was set for a warehouse on the outskirts of town, where Grayson conducted much of his illegal business. The night was cold and clear as we approached the warehouse. Nick and Sarah were by my side, their faces etched with determination. We had positioned ourselves strategically, hiding in the shadows, while Detective Harris and his team prepared to move in. "Jake," Nick said, his voice low and urgent as we crouched behind a stack of crates. "Remember, we need to get Grayson's actions on tape. If we can catch him in the middle of a transaction, it'll be solid evidence." "I know," I replied, gripping my camera tightly. "I'm ready." Sarah checked her equipment one last time. "This is going to be dangerous. Stay sharp, and don't take unnecessary risks." We waited in tense silence, the only sounds the distant hum of city traffic and the occasional rustle of the wind. After what felt like an eternity, the first of Grayson's henchmen arrived, their dark silhouettes moving with practiced efficiency. Grayson's operation was in full swing. "Here we go," I whispered as Detective Harris and his team positioned themselves for the raid. My heart raced as I watched the scene unfold through the lens of my camera. Grayson arrived fashionably late, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was as imposing as ever, dressed in a sharp suit that belied the criminal empire he controlled. He greeted his men with a mixture of cold authority and smugness, clearly confident that everything was going according to plan. "This is it," Nick said, his voice barely audible. "Get ready." As Grayson began discussing a new shipment of drugs and illicit money, Detective Harris signaled for the raid to commence. The warehouse was suddenly flooded with flashing lights and shouts as the police stormed in. "Victor Grayson, you're under arrest," Harris shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Grayson's face twisted in fury as he saw the police closing in. He tried to make a run for it, but Nick and I intercepted him. "You think you can just waltz in and destroy everything I've built?" Grayson spat, struggling against us. "Not so fast, Grayson," I said, my voice steely. "You're done. Your empire is collapsing." Grayson's eyes flicked to the camera I was holding, and a sinister smile spread across his face. "You think you're winning? You have no idea what's coming next." His words were unsettling, but there was no time to dwell on them. The police were securing the area, arresting his men, and gathering evidence. Grayson was cuffed and led away, his face a mask of rage and defeat. As the scene began to settle, Detective Harris approached us, his expression one of grim satisfaction. "Good work tonight. This evidence will be more than enough to put Grayson away for a long time." "Thank you," I said, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. "I couldn't have done it without your help." Harris nodded. "Just doing my job. You should know, though, that this isn't over. Grayson had connections. Be careful." I watched as Grayson was driven away, the realization hitting me that the fight was far from over. But for now, the victory felt sweet. "Let's get out of here," Sarah said, her voice weary but relieved. "It's been a long night." As we walked back to the car, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. The vendetta that had consumed me for so long was finally coming to a close. But there was one last piece of the puzzle I needed to confront. Back at my apartment, as the dawn began to break, Nick and Sarah sat with me, the room filled with a heavy silence. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a document that had come to light during our investigation. It was a confession from one of Grayson's associates, detailing his involvement in my mother's death. "I don't know how to process this," I said, my voice cracking. "Grayson, he was behind it all. My mother's death was a part of his game." Sarah reached out, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Jake. I wish there was more we could do." Nick nodded solemnly. "We've done all we can. You fought hard for justice, and that's something to be proud of." The weight of the revelation was almost too much to bear, but it also gave me a sense of closure. The truth about my mother's death was out in the open, and Grayson's empire was in ruins. As I looked around at my friends, a flicker of hope started to take root. I had fought through betrayal, manipulation, and darkness. Now, with Grayson behind bars and the path to healing ahead, I was ready to rebuild my life. The chapter of revenge was closed. The next chapter was about finding peace and moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future worth fighting for.